Hey everyone, I'm Mitchell Hora, a farmer in Iowa, and you're listening to Fieldwork. Big thanks to the Walton Family Foundation for their support this season.
And I am Zach Johnson, a farmer from Minnesota. This is a podcast by farmers for farmers where we talk about what's working, what's not, which we're trying to figure that out just right here at the podcast. What are we going to talk about today, Mitchell?
Well, let's talk about cotton since I know zero about cotton.
It's a big crop.
Might as well. I mean, it's worth a lot of money. A lot of people have, mixed feelings when you think about cotton, especially around, the slave era, where, the colonists were planting seeds and had the massive plantations that were really focused around cotton. Unfortunately, of course, utilizing slaves. Then it went to having sharecroppers and kind of a different era of cotton growth. And now it's majorly mechanized and they got crazy equipment for picking cotton now. I think some of those machines cost like $1 million for some of these cotton pickers. It's really insane.
It is. It's crazy. And there's no denying that, cotton is a massive crop here in the U.S. It's a major export for us. So it's a big deal. But today we are going to talk with somebody that's going to fill us in a little bit more about what's going on in the modern cotton industry now.
Yeah. So Dr. Andy Jordan is our guest today. He grew up picking cotton on his father's farm in Georgia. Andy is a super cool dude that I met not quite a year ago. And he has been really influential in developing the cotton industry that we have today.
Yeah, you mentioned he grew up actually picking cotton on his dad's farm in Georgia. That was back in the 50s. He went on actually to an engineering career at AT&T and Lockheed, and eventually came back to cotton. So it all came full circle. Now he's helped engineer new standards that could end up being great for both cotton farmers and the environment.
And so now we can actually go and learn about cotton and educate all of you as well. Hopefully you enjoy this. Here's our interview with Andy Jordan.
I know that I'm wearing a cotton t-shirt at the moment.
Well, that's a good thing.
That is a good thing. And I know that cotton is huge when it comes to the export market. I know that as well. But when it comes down to the details of actually the agriculture side and the agronomic side of cotton, that's not something I know a whole lot about, being from central Minnesota.
But one of the things that I know about cotton is that the traceability component of it is massive. And they're doing a great job of every bale is traced all the way back. They all have a unique barcode and everything like that. But Andy, tell us a little bit about your background and lead us into talking about sustainability from a cotton standpoint.
Cotton's customers, they really care about where their clothing comes from because cotton has a heritage going back for many centuries of being a bad actor. The horrific slave trade, to some extent in the U.S., was centered on cotton, and that's a thing that we're trying to make sure that we never repeat again. Unfortunately, parts of the rest of the world are still doing that, unfortunately. That's another reason why our customers are really insisting that we have a program, we in cotton, U.S. Cotton, has a program of assuring that cotton is grown responsibly, we're treating workers fairly, we're treating communities fairly, we're caring about biodiversity, and all of these things that we talk about on a regular basis.
Okay, so there's a lot of different aspects here to how cotton is grown, how it's produced, the climate impact, the water impact, and the people impact. This is all wrapped up into this Cotton Trust Protocol. So explain that to us a little bit. How did the Cotton Trust Protocol itself come about? And how do you think that protocol can relate to other crops as well?
Great question. Well, the U.S. Cotton Trust Protocol, I must admit, I was asked to help develop a protocol, and these are my names. I said, I presented this to a special committee of the National Cotton Council, and understand the National Cotton Council are not just farmers. It's the whole vertical chain from cotton farmers up to the spinners, the ones who take the cotton fiber and put it into yarn. So it's vertically integrated. So developed a program which I said, this is a protocol to show trust. What are the fundamentals of trust? Is transparency, traceability, and trackability and responsibility. For a farmer, it's a set of questionnaires. You make a commitment. I want to participate. 120 questions. All right, that establishes the baseline. The second part is take 10% of your acres, develop the field to market metrics on that. Use that as the baseline, and then a commitment that you will continue to work toward improvements. We officially launched it last July with a pilot program. We officially announced the full-blown program after making some adjustments in the pilot just recently. How does a farmer sign up? Go to trustusacotton.org.
Yeah, we'll definitely get that linked in the notes and stuff, and encourage farmers to go and check that out.
If you do sign up, you have some minimum requirements for protecting your land. That's kind of a softball that they're throwing at you, but you're going to be doing it. But it helps to articulate what's behind this, the conservation provisions of the Farm Bill. Then there are other questions and not requirements. What sort of tillage practices are you using? Is it conventional tillage, which means after you harvest your crop, you till it, or you bare during the winter. Next spring, you till it again and you plant it, and then you cultivate it to keep the weeds out all year round. Or the alternative to that is, do you have a conservation tillage program? Is it no-till? Are you planting cover crops? Understand these questions are beginning to hone in on your practices.
So dig us a little bit deeper in how this all works. So, because I don't know a whole lot about growing cotton, and I know a lot of our listeners might not know a whole lot about growing cotton. So walk us through the process here of how a farmer, walk us through kind of the growing process, I suppose, of cotton, but also that documentation and the traceability component here from start to finish. Do you, like, as you're choosing how to plant that cotton, or like your crop rotations, and walk us, I guess, through a little bit more of the process and how a farmer actually participates in the protocol?
Okay, first of all, I will never tell a farmer how to farm, but we will provide them metrics for, first of all, the farmer must have an understanding that we need market access. And one of the ways to help us access to markets is to be sure that we can give them metrics on why it's important that we do these things. But again, I will not tell a farmer how to farm, but we can provide them a checklist of best management practices. Are they required? No, only ones we absolutely require, with some exception, are those that are tied to a regulation. Others are recommended best practices. For example, we will recommend that a farmer, if it suits their farm, to use a no-till or conservation tillage. Understand, we're recommending that. It's not requiring that. There's a difference. But once, and you're a farmer, I would venture to say, Mitchell and Zach, you're finding the better you manage your farm to meet your objectives of profitability, yields, reduction of inputs, those have a direct relationship to the environmental impact. So fundamentally, a farmer is going to do the things that keep them in business, but also providing some metrics for measuring how well they're doing from these environmental standpoints, which, let's face it, when I show a farmer, okay, your greenhouse gases only, now I've got a real issue. I hope you're not hearing my dog now.
Yeah, we can hear it.
We can pause it and I can go let him go chase the cat, or we can continue.
I think get him on here, see if he has anything to say about cotton.
So we'll just keep rolling. Okay, so a lot of these metrics and in like documenting what is your tillage practices and stuff like that, my understanding is it's being all housed in the field to market field print calculator tool. Is that correct? And explain that to a tool to us.
The filter market is a companion. There are two components to the stress protocol. One is a questionnaire of best management practices. The other is that we're requiring, as a member of the trust protocol, to use select 10% of their acreage, which is representative. That's somewhat subjective, but generally you can choose on your farm representative fields. And you put in the detailed inputs, your tillage practices, your fertilization practices, your rates, your timing of your fertilization, your sources. You put in the number of trips over the field for your tractors or for your sprayers, for your fertilizers. You'll input your a conservation template that is typically NRCS has hundreds of templates that go into a crop management system. We provide that information that provides detailed metrics of how well the farmer, these fields look. Now, we are not telling a farmer that you must go in and choose the different practices, but what we're doing, we're providing the metrics. Once you have data, then you can do a scenario planning. Okay, what if I was able to reduce my nitrogen by 10% by more efficient use of the nitrogen, putting it where it's needed, and in the area of the field that it don't need it, don't put it there. I'm hoping Mitchell will catch on to this, because I think he's got some tools that help farmers to do that. So precision application can maybe reduce your nitrogen or use the same amount of nitrogen, but increase the yield in some areas that's needed. So that improves your metrics because they're based on a per pound of fiber. That's one example. Others, the farmer can do a scenario on soil loss. And cotton is grown in some parts of the country. We have soil losses above what we call T value. And so our goal is to have the fields at T value. So if a farmer is losing, say, 10 tons an acre per year, and with conventional tillage, you can do a scenario. Okay, I will use a conservation tillage practice. That will reduce my soil loss from 10 to 5, for example. It's pretty dramatic. Or you're looking at soil carbon, soil health. You know, this farmer is doing conventional tillage again year after year. Okay, what if we planted a cover crop? What would that do to your soil carbon over time? You begin to see these metrics, and to the extent we can tie in profitability with these practices. And the metrics is what we sell to the brand, so to speak. That's the reason they want our fiber, not only because it's grown responsibly, but we can also give them metrics for planning their corporate sustainability objective. So to the extent that we can show the farmers, you have increased profits here, plus we have more access to markets, it's a win-win. It's a so-called triple bottom line.
So my understanding is that cotton farmers are using a lot less water and energy, both water and energy, less to grow the crop that, compared to what they used to. We've got actually a question from one of our listeners. So Jimmy Webb is wondering, is that true with the technology that we have today? Are we using less water and chemistry than what cotton growers did 20 to 30 years ago? And if that is true, how were the growers able to make these changes?
A great question. And there are two parts to that. One, look back 30 years ago, we are using 82% less water for the nation for producing cotton on a per pound basis. You could argue whether 79% of 82%, but it's a tremendous number.
You said that's just in 30 years?
Huh?
Is that just in 30 years, you said?
In 30 years, we're using that much less water. Now, That meant 30 years, let's put it this way, 30 years ago, we wasted a lot of water. Our irrigation practices, water was cheap, it was easy to come by, we were not measuring it, we watered as much as we wanted, so to speak. We wasted a lot. So how did we make that change? We go over this course of time, we go to more efficient irrigation practices. We go to more efficient, if you sprinkle irrigation instead of high pressure nozzles, you go to low pressure drip system, low pressure emitters on your pivots. Or if you're furrow irrigation, if you're furrow irrigating, you'd put the water at one end and you run it all day long, run out the next on the other end, it's wasted. So we're developing technologies, have technologies now. I don't know if you're familiar with Pipe Planter. It's a system of irrigating a row. It's a commercial service which designs the size of the hole for each length of row so that you turn the water on, it reaches the end of the row if it's a furrow irrigation, all at the same time, no waste, essentially no waste, everything is watered. That's one way. Tremendous savings in loss of water. Drip systems, drip irrigation is not a predominant of use in the U.S. right now because it's so expensive. But in the far western desert areas, drip irrigation is very effective. It's put in at say 18 inches below the surface soil. You need to put a little water on it to get the cotton to germinate for the roots to reach the level. That cuts down the amount of evaporation. So it's supplying just the amount of water that it needs. That's where we've been the past 30 years. But the real question is, what do we do next? So, so we still have some goals for further water use efficiency. In other words, for each additional gallon or cubic meter of water applied, we will get more fiber from that. And that will be done by continuing to monitor the wells. Right now, you ask many farmers, how much water are you putting on? And say, well, I'm not so sure, but it's a 9-inch pipe and it's running full. You know, we've got to do better. We've got to do better than that. We need to measure. So there are practices now, actually, somewhat as an indirect result of the trust protocol. There are now partnerships going to help farmers to put in either timers on their irrigation system or flow meters. Now, we're trying to get ahead of the regulations because if we don't do it voluntarily, somebody will make us. So let's get ahead and start applying those practices. Having data and making information out of that data is so important. That's what we're looking for in the future. And we do the same thing on greenhouse gases, for example. You know, we'll look, we develop a number, then you find out what practices help to enhance that. And what's it do? It cuts your, going back to water, what are the benefits of the farmer? First of all, there are the tremendous benefits of maintaining the resource of the water. But the second is the cost of pumping. Pumping water, irrigation from a 100-foot well or deeper, that's a tremendous energy. So if we can pump 30% less water and still get the yield that we need, you've cut your energy use tremendously.
You hit on how cotton's really big on, you know, keeping track of the metrics and the greenhouse gases and all the data there, and using the technology to say, this is what it took to grow this product, and this is the energy that went into it, and this is what we've gotten out of it, and there's a lot of traceability there. Do you have any examples as far as telling us or explaining to us, or maybe giving us an example of why or how that becomes so important, and and how we can relate that back to the consumers, and really, why does cotton need to stick with that route?
Yeah, and by the way, I think that's a great question, and uh, the reason is why this is so important. If you have a conversation with any of the major brands of, look at the labels on your garments there. Pretty good chance those have a brand or a manufacturer or a retailer that's got their total credibility invested in that brand. And there are society is pushing brands and retailers to do the right thing. Choose a topic. Uh, Climate change. We can argue about whether it's man-made climate change or other. I don't get into that argument. We do agree on the need to measure our greenhouse gas emissions. Now, getting to your question, these brands, retailers, billion-dollar companies, they are writing their developing their science-based targets. A science-based target is saying we as a corporation are adjusting our business practices so that by pick a number, year 2030, we will be supporting the climate change objectives coming out of international agreements, the climate change agreements, to reduce or limit the amount of greenhouse gases to a certain level, which means you get to this certain level, you are limiting the change in temperature, climate temperature, you're limiting it by 1.5 degrees Celsius. How do you do that? You back that up saying, okay, we must reduce our greenhouse gas emissions as let me just say, as a fashion industry, that is textiles from producing fiber as polyester, cotton, rayon, nylon, whatever, to the shelf at the retail store. We want to reduce those greenhouse gases by 45%. That's one number. And these science-based targets, they are nationally known. The customers of these companies are looking to see what Levi or Wrangler or Brooks Brothers or Walmart or Gap or just name a company. What are you doing to help us with the long-term sustainability of our planet? And so the pressure is on them. And what we're doing is saying, listen, you buy U.S. cotton, you've got a number. You buy our cotton, and we can give you the metrics for helping develop your long-term strategies. And every one of these companies, you can be sure they have either a person, but usually a staff of persons whose sole responsibility is look at their corporate objective and sustainability. Now, I mentioned just one aspect, that is the science-based targets. Those are official, those are internationally recognized, those are published, and each company is doing their best so that they will not be on somebody's blame and shame list. Unfortunately, some of it's negative. The last thing you are, if you have a brand, to be shown that you are doing something really bad. For example, there's some recently who are using cotton produced in China. It turns out this cotton fiber grown in the western province of Xinjiang, China, they're using incarcerated labor to pick the cotton, to work in the textile mills. That's a horrific thing. And now some brands are saying, we will not use those fibers for there because it has such a horrific history of using people, forcing people to do this work. In this case, prison labor, and these prisoners are incarcerated because of their heritage, because of their religion. Similar came out of Central Asia and Uzbekistan years ago. They were forcing children to work in the fields for picking cotton. Summarily, if you are a retailer, pick a name, Macy's, Walmart, Kmart, whatever. You will not want any of your products to be associated with such practices. Now, I mentioned that for science, I mentioned the social aspect, and that goes on with energy. Each of these companies have energy objectives. If we can show them that you purchase our cotton branded through our programs, we can give you the energy level of cotton on this fiber. Nobody, no other country in the world can do that. So that gives them an incentive to want to purchase our cotton.
Zach and I talk about sustainability and stuff all the time, but typically from a row crop standpoint. And I think there is a lot more of a talk about sustainability from a row crop space. Those of us that are further up the Mississippi River than you guys down in the South. But why do you think the cotton industry is so much further along, especially when it comes to sustainability and taking care of the soil?
Well, I tell you what, the reason we might be perceived to be further along is because of the need. We've got brands and retailers around the world saying that we will source our fibers. Notice I didn't say cotton. We source our fibers from responsible sources. We've had cotton is unlike other food crops such as bean and soy. There are no synthetic alternatives for cotton. I mean, for soy and corn, for example. But for cotton, you can go to rayon, you can go to tencel, you can go to polyester, and we can argue about the sustainability components of those fibers. But the customers also, there's a great need for cotton fiber, and other NGOs and other countries who were feeling that they're doing the right thing, develop sustainable programs for cotton. And those really raise ahead as we would go into markets, and most of our cotton in the US is exported. So our export customers are extremely important. If you have a brand or retailer in Europe and they'll say, we want fibers only from approved sources, and we would look at the approved sources, and there are various services which will provide a sustainability component of fibers. And U.S. cotton was not on the list. How come? Because we don't have a program. We don't have a sustainable program. And we take the position, very much like soy has been very successful in doing, is saying, listen, we are growing in the U.S. We have many laws and regulations, which it's not an option for us not to do the right thing. We have laws and regulations on workers, worker rights. There's not an option for us not to do the right thing. But our customer says, but you're not showing us what the farmer is doing. You're just showing what an aggregate of the U.S. is doing. Again, that works great for soy, and I applaud that. We tried that, but it was not enough for our customers. So that goes to developing a program that gets down to a personal interaction with farmers to say, yes, I'll be transparent. I will tell you, I will have a minimum standards of practices, which, by the way, is basically following the regs. You know, we follow the reg, we follow the laws of the land, we follow the conservation provisions of the Farm Bill, and but we have a farmer attesting to the fact that yes, I'm doing that, and I'm participating. And if anybody really wants to look over my shoulder, they're welcome to come in and look at my practices. We'll verify this with a third party that we are following these practices. Is there a cost involved in that? Yes, there's a cost. There's also a cost of us not doing it because we have lost business. That's a long way of saying, Zach, to your question, why did we get into it? It's because it was a need.
Okay, we'll hear more from Dr. Andy Jordan after a little break. And now we're back talking to Dr. Andy Jordan about progress on cotton farms and cotton sustainability.
Why do you think the practices for cotton are under such tight scrutiny like that, where you've had to develop these protocols? Is Is it something where, I understand that the big companies that have their names on the tag of my shirt and everything, they want to make sure that they protect the integrity of the brand. But why is cotton in the spotlight so much more like this when compared to, say, corn and soybeans and traditional commodity crops? What do you think on that?
It's not necessarily the consumer. You go and ask the consumer at Walmart, do you care? They probably say, well, maybe and maybe not. But the ones supplying Walmart really care because their name, their reputation on the line. So again, why cotton and not other commodities? I can't explain that except that that's the way the consumers in Germany, in Great Britain, uh, European countries, much more so than the US. The US consumer is not particularly engaged in the fibers as they are in Europe.
Yeah, so I definitely think, there's some of that short-term economic gain that can be had by these farmers, but also looking at the long-term sustainability kind of aspect of all this too. But my question is, as you've been in discussions and in some big time meetings with major brands and corporations, what are they asking about? Or like, how are they thinking about it? So you mentioned, reporting on water usage, on your carbon footprint, on your soil loss, but what are they asking about? And how much of it is farmer and the ag end of it saying, hey, here's what you should be thinking about, versus how much of it is coming from the corporate side saying, hey, what can you guys deliver to us on these metrics? I guess kind of what direction is it coming from, and how did some of those conversations go as you're determining what needs to be quantified?
And that's really interesting question because it comes from all of the above. It depends on the corporate personality. Recently, I've been talking with a major brand, and their interest is carbon. They are really deeply interested in reducing atmospheric carbon, greenhouse gases, but also they um, have learned, hey, we understand that there's some really nice practices that if you put more of this carbon in the soil, that farmers are happier, you have better water use efficiency. So we would like to be associated with some good things. Is that scientific from their standpoint? No, but it's a really, you might say it's their marketing or it's their corporate personality. There are others who are more interested in water. And so they will focus on, by the way, we really have to be careful in the US because our protocol, we do not want anybody to use this protocol to say that a Texas farmer is better than a North Carolina farmer, which is better than a California farmer, whatever. That's forbidden. We're trying to prevent that. What we're saying that corporately US, we're reducing our energy, water, and so on as an aggregate. So the numbers that we provide to our customers, that's an aggregate number for the US, whether it's water, energy, greenhouse gases, and so on. That way that keeps them in the game saying, yes, we are making a big difference on the whole footprint of cotton, not just selecting a few fields here or a few fields there. And I use that example. So, you could do it with organic. If you say growing organic radishes, okay, I'm going to grow some organic radishes here. And you don't save the world with a few acres of organic radishes or a few acres of organic cotton. You're going to save the world by adoption across a broad landscape.
What do you see as far as future cutting edge innovations and specific practices for sustainability that you see coming down the pipeline in the future?
Uh, this is really where the tools that we're having to better understand what each square meter or what each square foot needs, and being able to apply those needs to the square foot rather than to the 100-acre block. Call it precision agriculture, call it what you want. But that's where the real opportunities are for doing better on each square foot of land. And with the tools and programs that we have now being developed to refine how well a farmer manages each square foot of land, that's a real opportunity. Go to fertilizer. Now let's go to nitrogen again. Cotton has published some goals for reducing its greenhouse gas emissions by 39%. Where you get that, you get some from improved yields. You can get improved yields through improved genetics. You can get 10% improved genetics with the same inputs. Then you can get, say, 10% there. You can get it with reduction in fuel use. Say if you can reduce our energy for diesel fuel for your tractors and sprayers and so on by 10%, then okay, you can get 10% there. But where does the rest of it come from? A lot of the greenhouse gases are coming not from directly related to energy, petroleum fuel, but related to the nitrogen fertilizer. Nitrogen fertilizer, it has so much embedded energy to generate the fertilizer. It takes a lot of natural gas to make a ton of it. That's one component. If you can reduce by 10%, understand I'm saying reducing it, not reducing what the plant needs. We're going to be doing it through more efficient application, more precise application. So if you are losing, say, a pound of N to the atmosphere, a pound of N, nitrogen converts to nitrous oxide. A pound of nitrous oxide is equivalent to 300 pounds of CO2. See where I'm going is have a real multiplier effect. So energy, fertilization efficiency is a big area where we will get that.
So yeah, definitely the fertilizer component is one of the direct ways that a farmer can really actively improve their footprint of their farm. Got a question from Twitter here from Andy, one of our buddies, Christoph from Nori. And Christoph wants to know what are some other meaningful changes that farmers can implement, but especially as they look at implementing some of their data, they put their data into the field print calculator, and it says, "Hey, here's some of your scores." What are some of the other practices that farmers often adopt that can help them to improve their score and improve their profitability as well? So, what are some of the other, I guess, initial changes that you see farmers going to make beyond even just improving their nitrogen efficiency?
Wow, that's really great. Great question from Christoph. One of those is the emerging markets of carbon trading. To the extent that we can have those practices on our farm, including cover crops, no-till, that we can show and demonstrate improved carbon storage. There are two elements here. One that's sequestering carbon, the other is keeping the carbon out of the atmosphere, somewhat related, but not necessarily related. Then developing a viable carbon market. This pulls farmers into long-term getting a payment in addition to improved water use efficiency, improved yield, improved crop production practices, but eventually getting a direct payment. That would be a tremendous boost and farmers' incentive to practice to adopt these practices.
So dig a little bit further on the economics of that too. How do the economics work for the protocol overall? Are there any economic incentives directly there for farmers to participate and to enter some of their data? Because obviously there's a cost of collecting the data and some real time to fill out the questionnaires and such like that. Is it, are there any direct economic incentives for that, or not necessarily, or some in production, or dig into the economics a little bit more?
Great question. That's the top question that we get from many farmers. Okay, I'm going to adopt these practices.
Now show me the money.
Show me the money.
Show me the money. Let's
show
do
me
it.
the money. And my answer is, I can't show you directly money, but I can demonstrate a better opportunity for you to have a market for your cotton. That's number one. You got to have a market. That doesn't sell it for some. Uh, Others, is there a premium? Somebody should be paying me a premium. I don't disagree, but our customers saying, we expect farmers to do the best thing. And also, if you look at the fashion industry, their margins are so tight. Companies are going out of business now, partially because of the COVID-19, but also the margins are so tight that they are saying, I need to source cotton from the most profitable area I can get it. But I also want these attributes. And unfortunately for cotton, US cotton, they do have alternatives. There are other programs, international programs, that they can get the feel good metrics that cotton is grown responsibly. So so it's getting down to now the other part of finding additional incentives. We are looking for ways with the protocol, and I can't get ahead of the thinking process here. We're looking for ways for additional incentives for perhaps a brand to say, listen, I want to help farmers do better. So try to find some way for brand from a corporate partnership to provide incentives, whether it's an incentive for payment. Yeah, ideally, we want to say we'll pay you a premium. When we grow the market, we can eventually get that, but I'm not going to promise a farmer they'll get an incentive.
Well, and
Okay.
I think what's interesting with that though is that you can have the incentive and kind of the dollars of it directly tied to the product itself, directly tied to that bale of cotton, or for Zach and I's scenario, you can have that premium directly tied to the bushel of grain or the bale of cotton, or you can have that incentive in the dollar separate, like in the carbon market that you mentioned, where you have direct, either the data stays tied to the product and is sold at a premium, or the data is essentially sold, but it's sold separately from the actual product itself. And that way you can aggregate the data on its own, and maybe be able to, like I said, offset some greenhouse gases or participate in carbon markets from the data being separate than the actual cotton itself.
Mitchell, you're right. It's more likely to be that their air where it's separated, it's decoupled from, and that has some advantages from a textile mill standpoint. If you look at a somebody in the fashion industry, they've got two pools of money. One, they've got the pool of money for those who are generating products and contracting with textile mills to spin the fiber and garment manufacturers to assemble the stuff, and then the retailer to get a profit. Uh, those people are looking at the cost of the raw material intensely. So they've got to keep their costs down to keep their job. The other bucket in these corporations, there's the you might say the overhead budget or the CSR budget. That's the corporate sustainability budget, maybe from a foundation that we think these sustainability programs so important to us. We've got a separate bucket, so to speak, a separate budget. We keep those separate. So that way, the ones who are having to purchase the fibers don't get caught up into having to justify why they're paying 1 or 2 cents more per pound for this fiber. So they can continue to look for their best price, then let the corporate sustainability office make sure they're sourcing from places such as US.
You talk about sourcing from places like the US, and you had mentioned earlier about the different practices used in other parts of the world. Can you talk a little bit about the spectrum of practices where you talked about the hand picking in Western China to what goes on here in the US, and why that is, why that difference, and why is there such a broad range out there of the different harvesting techniques? And is it that way all the way through the process from planting to harvest?
Well, think in terms of, okay, I pick on Europe. Look at a European consumer. They really do want to help from a social standpoint. They want to help, say, the African farmer in uh, pick a country, uh, Mali. They want to help a Mali cotton farmer who has 1 or 2 acres of land, and cotton is the only cash crop. And they want to help these families who, by the way, the women do most of the work and children pick a lot of the cotton. And so they want to help them economically. They probably would not measure up to what the farmers in the US do. They don't measure up, but it's what they call a better cotton initiative. We're helping them to be better. So, from the European brand or European consumer, you're helping their people in a road of continuous improvement. In the US, we start on the road of continuous improvement. We're already highly efficient, and our goal is to get better. In, say, Africa, their role also is to get better, but they're starting from a different level. So it's sometimes uncomfortable to appear to be pitting a, say, 1,000-acre cotton farmer with highly mechanized equipment, with a harvester that costs $750,000, with a family in Africa who has a little plant of cotton which they grow for cash. Hopefully, they make enough profit to pay for their children's school and education, pay for some health care, pay for some clean water, versus, again, the U.S. farmer, which appears to be, in the world's eye, a corporate farmer. He's not a corporate farmer; he's a family farmer. We understand that, it's a system of economics here.
Andy, we've got another question here from a listener, actually, of Fieldwork. Matt in Texas is wondering, what can dryland cotton farmers, like out in West Texas, where it's always dry throughout most of the growing season, what can they do to help keep moisture in the soil? Whereas in this last year in 2020, it sounds like a lot of farmers actually took crop insurance on a lot of the acres because it was too dry during the year and they didn't really get a crop. What can those guys do? What's some advice for them?
Well, that you're absolutely right. In West Texas this year, there was a lot of cotton. If it doesn't rain, it doesn't rain. How can we be more efficient with our water is fundamentally to the extent that we can keep the residue on the soil, eliminate the evaporation, build the subsoil moisture to the end of years that we do have rain. So it's a tough one. And then let me say, the West Texas dryland farmer, there's a set of questions for the dryland farmer. In fact, the protocol is regionalized. So again, it doesn't assume the same practices in West Texas dryland as it does on West Texas irrigated, or in, say, the Mid-South irrigated or dryland.
Are you seeing, just to kind of sidestep from that question, are you seeing a lot more or are you seeing a lot less tillage for the cotton farmers out there?
Well, the answer is yes. In cotton farming now, something like 60% to 60 or 67% of cotton is grown on some type of conservation tillage practices. That's where we started this program, and we hopefully intend to grow that.
A lot of this, I think, boils down to what we were just saying there, the continual improvement. And we need to work toward wrapping this up here. But my question is, okay, what can farmers and industries learn from the cotton industry? How can we take these protocols and adopt them at a larger scale and continue to improve not only the U.S. cotton industry, but U.S. agriculture or global agriculture overall? What are some of the next steps in your eyes on how we can all continue to learn and implement at a larger scale?
I think it's already happening. If you let's look at it from a commodity standpoint. I think practically all of the major commodities in the U.S. are beginning to think in terms of setting our industry goals. What's our goal for soy on energy per bushel? What's our goal in soy on greenhouse gases? What's our goals for soil loss? Okay, that's the first step, setting those goals. Cotton industry, we started with setting certain goals for these products. Then how do we get there? Don't just set a goal and pull it out of the air. You set a goal that might be realistic, not might be, is realistic. It can be achievable. Yeah, a lot of this depends on the weather. We don't know what the weather's going to be 5 years from now, but we've got to look and choose goals and move toward those goals. That's a start. Then the second part is I think that we will see in other commodities, such as, and I'm saying such as corn and soy, those are the major commodities, peanuts. It's happening in peanuts already, that the customers of peanuts and cotton and corn and soy, they'll begin to want to know more about as they develop their uh, uh, sustainable development goals. And I'm not going to pick a name of a feeder of soybean meal to poultry or to swine. But you can be sure those companies are having pressure internally and with their boards of directors. Okay, what are we going to do to meet the UN Sustainable Development Goals? Hunger is a major one. Soy is saying, hey, we can help solve a UN international goal, sustainable development goal on world hunger by more efficient use of production of soybeans, responsible use of production of soybeans, responsible meaning energy, greenhouse gases, water, uh, water quality, biodiversity. We began to see those more refined. In my suggestion that the soy industry adopt a protocol engaging every single farmer, I would not recommend that right now because you mentioned earlier, there's an expense involved. There's a lot of pain here. There's no guarantee of a profit, but it's something that in cotton we felt like we needed to do. And I'm thinking that most likely in the next 5 or 10 years, we will see even more pressure from the national commodities and choose a commodity. There are dozens of those out there that are continuing to move toward developing better metrics, developing better transparency, developing traceability. And let's face it, it's impossible to trace a soybean, Mitchell, from you or Zach's farm to a crushing mill in China. But there are virtual tracking systems, which you, Mitchell, you develop a responsible grown bushel of soybeans, then that can be a credit that you'll substitute somewhere along the line with the mass balance. But there's a pressures out there for you to grow more responsible beans, and it'll happen. It is happening, already happening.
This has been a really, really interesting conversation, Andy, and really appreciate having you on. You're a massive wealth of knowledge. And I think what the cotton industry has done, like you said, I think it is going to continue to expand. There's so much pressure but momentum really in this space as well. And I think the COVID situation has progressed it even further, that people are interested in, where making sure that things are going to be sustainable and that things are going to be healthy and that farmers are doing the right thing. And we know that we are, but we need to document that better. And I think the cotton industry has done a really good job of that. So definitely appreciate, your leadership in that. And I'm glad that we could learn a little bit about cotton here today and continue to amplify the message here through the podcast.
Thank you. It's my pleasure. Thoroughly enjoyed it. Anytime.
There's a lot more to learn about the U.S. Cotton Trust Protocol on the main website, which is trustuscotton.org.
I think it's kind of funny because it looks like trustuscotton.org, but it's Trust US Cotton. Check it out. If you go there, you'll see more about what's involved, how to sign up, and how it's going for cotton growers who decided to join this new protocol.
Consumers want to see, where their stuff's coming from, where the product's coming from, and how is it grown and raised, and where does it go after that. And it is interesting to hear about what's going on inside cotton.
And the cotton industry, I think, has really taken a lead that a lot of other industries are going to have to follow in terms of documentation, telling the story, utilizing data to really help to tell that farmer message and show, hey, here's US cotton, here's how it's produced, and here's why you should go and buy it at a global scale. So props to them for really going and leading the charge when it comes to sustainability at scale.
It is impressive to see how the industry has responded to consumers wanting that information.
One of the tools that they use for data collection is the field print calculator from Field to Market, where we are able to get a score about sustainability and really give farmers some more metrics that they can build upon. So we're going to talk to some of those farmers, and we're actually going to talk with another cotton farmer from down in Arkansas and hear about some of the sustainability journey that he's got going on his own farm. Well, and what's really cool about it is, there's lots of different sustainability initiatives going on, but they're typically from like a small-ish organization or a small-ish group of farmers, and then it builds up from there. Where the Cotton Trust Protocol is saying, we're going to do this for our entire industry. And I think that is pretty darn forward thinking, but a huge undertaking that they're just getting going on. But really cool that Dr. Andy Jordan, has played a role in that and been able to build up what seems to be, already a pretty successful initiative.
We're actually going to be digging into cotton a little bit more this season. We're going to talk with a cotton farmer from Arkansas. Adam Chappell's going to join us. So make sure you guys tune into that episode.
Now, it sounds like it's time for a listener voicemail, Zach. Let's see what we got here today.
Hey, Mitchell and Zach. Just listening to you guys' podcast. I married a farmer's daughter from Missouri. I'm from Tampa, Florida. Didn't grow up with agriculture at all. And last year decided to give it a try just because I was going to go become a cop. Decided we'll try agriculture. And my family's farm, they have about 5,000 acres of corn and soybeans, and about 1,000 head of cattle with stockers and then also cow-calf. And we were in harvest season. I was looking at the ground, and it just didn't make sense to me because it just seemed so dead, and I'm used to different ecosystems looking alive. It didn't add up. So I started doing research on it, and of course, I've been in the grain cart all harvest, and about 40 hours of podcast later, my mind is blown. But basically, what I'm trying to ask is, how do I even go about approaching my family, who is just conventional farming to the T, as most conventional as you can get? How do I go about approaching them in a way of trying out some of these different techniques that me, as someone who didn't grow up with agriculture and being new to farming in general, I just feel like I have to word it in a way that they don't feel like I'm trying to tell them what they're doing is wrong, because obviously I have little knowledge of it, but it does make a lot more sense to me. And they do see me eventually taking over the farm, which is obviously going to be a ways away. But at the same time, this kind of type of farming with no-till, cover crops, regenerative, all those different aspects really interest me, and I can stand behind that. And also growing up in a city, I kind of have a good idea of what people like in terms of food, and that kind of, I guess, poor look that people have on agriculture these days. And I'd like to change that. But I feel like consumers definitely care a lot more about where their food comes from, and having a hard time relaying that message as well to my family. So long message, but if you guys could give me a call back, that'd be great, and answer my question. Have a good one. Bye.
Well, hey, thanks for the message. Really appreciate that. And I think it actually is a really cool situation that you're in. Quick couple thoughts. As I look at farmers trying to adopt more sustainable systems, you have to figure out how to overcome the economic and the logistic barriers. overcome the logistics by continuing to do research, reach out to other farmers that are around you, go into events, go into meetings, learning as much as you can, making sure that you know what you're doing as you get started. But definitely look into overcoming the economic barriers as well. I'd definitely go to your local NRCS office. They have multiple programs that could help to get some dollars to kind of flow in. So you can try this out on a small scale. Maybe start with, a field or two, and communicating with your family, saying, "Hey, this is the path forward that I view that is going to be really important. I want to at least give it a try. Trust me that I'll help to, make sure that it's going to be successful. Here's where the money is going to come from. Here's everything that I've learned. Let me have a shot." So that's my quick thoughts. What do you think, Zach?
Well, I think you hit on a lot of good points there. There's not an easy answer to it, because those of us even in agriculture, that can be a difficult conversation. I mean, just me trying to bring new ideas to the farm that I grew up on and have been involved in my entire life. That can be a difficult situation sometimes, because you have to respect the other generations and the time that they've put into this and how they've managed to this point. They know, they have a pretty good idea what they're doing. So bringing new ideas to the table can be a touchy subject, but it sounds like, he's got the right mentality. He wants to approach it correctly. He's going to respect that other generation, and he understands that, he hasn't been farming for 50 years. And I guess I would hope in a situation like that they would view that in the way that I would, which is, sometimes you get stuck in a system, you do what you do it really, really well, but it doesn't hurt to bring somebody from the outside in and get a new perspective on something. And sometimes in every industry, we can view that as being, it's outside of this world, right? We're not real comfortable letting that in because they don't know what's going on. But there's other ideas that happen in other walks of life that might be able to work really well in a situation like this. Bring somebody new in, new ideas. Hopefully they can come up with a way to at least try it. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. That's it for Fieldwork today. Our show is produced by Annie Baxter with lots of great help from Lori Stern, Amy Mayer, Mike Langseth, and Corey Suzuki.
Christian Schmidt runs our social media, Ellie Lyons does our marketing, and Lauren Humpert is our project coordinator.
Be sure to check us out on social media. We are at Fieldwork Talk on all the usual channels, and we'd love it if you wrote us a review to help other people find us.
Yeah, and don't forget that we love hearing from you, so definitely give us a call with your comments or questions. Call us up, leave us a voicemail, 651-228-4810. That's 651-228-4810.
Thanks for listening. We will catch you next time. Until then, Fieldwork Podcast out.
Hey, the listener clicked on listen.
Yeah, listen at your own risk.
That's their fault. You know what you're getting into. Like, at the end of the day, it sounds great. And that part has zero to do with us.